to the first interview of my artist collaboration series. This year's highlight is my good friend, Marshall Noice. So, just going to talk a little bit about his background, his passions, and just kind of how we came to this collaboration within this project that we decided to come up with. So, let's begin. How are you doing today?
Let's talk. I'm doing fine.
Fantastic.
I've got a lot of wet paintbrushes close by. I've got, some guitars, a drum set, and yeah, life is good.
Life is good.
Got you in the studio.
Surrounded by art and music is, I guess that could be a t-shirt for you, right?
It could be a t-shirt for me, yes.
Perfect. So Marshall, could you give me like the 5-minute tour of just kind of your history, more focused directly on your art at the moment? We'll talk about your music in a little bit, but just kind of the 5-minute tour of your artistic journey, of kind of what brought you to your particular art that you do, as well as just living in this area. So
I can do that. I'll try and condense it maybe down to my 40-second elevator introduction, and see if we can get started that way. And you can ask me any questions that come up. My art started, I don't really recall my art ever starting. I don't ever remember not making art. Even as a little kid, I was an unrepentant mark maker on anything that I could make a mark on with whatever I had in my hand. And I started drawing and painting when I was really young, and I just never quit doing it. I did make my living for a number of years as a musician, and all the time that I was doing that, I was painting and drawing for the fun of it. Worked as a commercial photographer for 23 years. All the time I had my photo studio. I also had a painting studio where I'd work a couple of days a week. Mm-hmm. So it's I never really decided to become a painter, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay. It's just something that has always been a part of my life. I honestly can't imagine life without art making.
So to back up a little, did either of your parents, were they artists, or what did they
My dad was a college professor, a scientist, also a jazz drummer. My mom was a art teacher, and I never knew her as an art teacher because when I came along, she became a full-time mom. But I think that genetically that I was probably predisposed to that lifestyle. My dad's older brother was a commercial artist, and there was definitely, art was an okay thing in my family. My dad's twin brother was a professional musician his whole life, and it was something that the people in my family did.
So, safe to say it's in your blood.
Safe to say it's in my blood. Deep in my DNA.
Yeah. Is Montana in your blood too? I guess I never knew where you grew up or where
I grew up in Minnesota and moved to Montana in 1968. Went to my last year of high school in Kalispell. And this is definitely home. And this is the environment and the landscape that inspires my work.
Very good. So with that, in regards to getting into your painting and things like that, how would you describe your style and technique to someone that's maybe not as, like me, that's not necessarily as initiated in art? So.
Yeah, well, it's definitely it's representational landscape painting, but it's not literal landscape painting. It is more about the way the landscape feels to me, as opposed to creating a painting that's highly specific regarding the way the landscape looks. It has been characterized by people who know about these things as expressionist landscape painting, contemporary colorist landscape painting, and these are terms that people who have knowledge of art history would be familiar with. But creating a literal landscape has never been high on my list of priorities. Creating a painting that feels right to me is what's important to me as a painter.
So taking that appreciation with the landscapes and things like that, is that in your past or in your present, how do you, or I guess, was it in your past or your present that you draw inspiration from for these landscapes? Is there something growing up that put a seed in you that that's what you wanted to do, or is it just obviously we're in a beautiful area and might as well take advantage of it?
I think that as a youngster, we spent every summer on a lake in Minnesota, and fortunately, I guess, as I look back on it, there were no kids on that lake for whatever reason, or no kids that I knew, or no kids near us. So I spent a lot of time as a little kid in nature by myself, looking at the surface of the water, the clouds, the trees, the quality of light, and just living in nature by myself. And like so many people of my age, I'd get up in the morning, have breakfast, leave the house, and the last thing my mom would say to me was, well, be back when it gets dark. And it was just all day rambling around the woods in my boat on the lake. And I think that I probably, all of those years of communing with nature probably predisposed me to finding the landscape as my subject matter. Before I was painting the landscape seriously, I was deeply involved in black and white landscape photography. And so again, it was just days on end out in nature and becoming aware of those nuances and finding my voice and recognizing what I found attractive and what I found inspirational.
Yeah, and I think to relate to you, having also grown up in Minnesota, I see a lot of your appreciation for color in the landscapes and things like that. And my imagination or memory goes to fall on the North Shore.
Yeah.
Walking on the Superior Hiking Trail and just surveying, the topography of that area and just the colors of the maples and the birch and the tamarack and all those come together. So safe to say that, you kind of experience that same appreciation.
We have that in common.
Okay, so let's talk about just your creative process when it comes to doing your work.
Sure.
You kind of answered this, but are you subject dependent or kind of free form when it comes to creating your landscapes?
Honestly, I would have to say I work in both of those. I approach painting in both of those ways. Sometimes a piece might be a fairly, it might start out as a fairly descriptive painting of a specific spot. Often they are. And as far as my work process goes, when I'm outdoors working, I typically work in pastel because it's on paper. I don't have wet paint to deal with in wind and with bugs and leaves and things like that. And then those sketches that I'll do outdoors will often become the subject matter that I begin a painting with in my studio. Other times, I'll just wake up in the morning and I'll think, I wonder what quinacridone rose would look like next to a really light alizarin crimson. And it could be just that can get me going. Let me see what that looks like. And the impetus for beginning a painting may be strictly about answering that question, or exploring that question would probably be, because you don't really answer those questions. So sometimes the paintings are site based. Sometimes the paintings are simply idea based. And usually, regardless of how the painting starts, once I get to a certain point in the painting process, the painting requires certain things of me to reach a point where it resonates for me as an artist. It's almost like at that point, the tail is wagging the dog. And I'll look at the work and I'll think, well, that is not what I thought it was going to be. We're not going in the direction that I initially intended. But in order to get that painting to a point of resolution, I need to do this. And so at some point, I just have to look and say, okay, this painting is not resolved. It's not finished. What does the painting need in order to reach that point of resolution?
So kind of taking the path from inspiration to resolution, which I think is a fantastic way to word that. Would you describe within your artwork particular elements that you prefer or like to focus on,
Sure.
or try to create
Yep.
as the focus in
Yeah.
your paintings?
There are a handful of things that I look for in a painting, that I like in a painting, that I've come to value in my work. And towards the end of a painting process, I'll look, and it's not cut and dried, but I'm attracted to light against dark, warm colors against cool colors, thick paint against thin paint, and hard edges against soft edges. And all of those, oftentimes, not always, but usually, all four of those elements are in a finished piece. And yeah, I kind of go through that checklist towards the end of a painting, and do I need that? Does it have to have warm against cool? Do I have to have that warm against that cool? Do I have to have that light against that dark? Or maybe that's a better example. But yeah, those are things. Those are aspects of a finished painting that I value, and I've reached that conclusion by looking at not only my work, but tens of thousands of paintings by other artists over the years. Looking at a piece, looking at it somewhat analytically. It's like, okay, I love that painting. What do I love about it? Oh, I like the fact that he's using those hard edges here and then the soft edges here, and it creates an aspect of tension that wouldn't exist without it. So part of it I've learned from the process, and part of it I've learned from looking.
Yeah, and I'd relate somewhat to that of just constructing an instrument.
Sure.
You're looking at colors, you're looking at the balance, you're looking at like you said, the tension or the conflict.
Yep.
I like to try to create some sense of conflict,
Yep.
but resolve it with harmony.
You do that, yeah.
In some way. And it seems, if people know you, you're a colorful personality, and obviously your appreciation for color is apparent. So what about vibrant colors moves you, and how are you hoping it can affect your audience?
Well, everybody's affected by color. That's a given. I mean, if we can agree on that.
There's a few people
Well, there
that
are
have
people,
visual
impairments. There are people who are colorblind, no question about that. But yeah, I think that, and everybody responds to color differently. And I think that the science, the physiology of vision, has proved to us that everybody sees color a little differently. Like that kind of purpley blue color will probably look slightly different to you than it does to me. What I see as stop sign red is not exactly the same red that you see as stop sign red. So I think that generally speaking, in both art and music, it's about creating an emotional response to either that music or that art. And it's not always about bright colors. It's not always about a song being in a major key, or being fortissimo. There's the range of emotions, I think, is very similar between painting and music, and I think that's where the exploration in both of those art forms gets really interesting.
Okay. Yeah, so talking of just kind of the experience then about it is, with a finished artwork, what do you hope people experience?
Something. That's really the bottom line right there. I think it's about communication. When I'm painting the picture, I'm having this communication with this piece of this artifact, and then when it's done, this thing goes out into the world and lives its own life, and I'm done having a conversation with it, but it will have a conversation with you, with the painting that you have of mine in your home. That's a different conversation, and your response to that artwork will quite likely be different than my response to that artwork, based on your experience and what you bring to the act of viewing the artwork or the act of listening to the music.
So a great analogy I recently heard was in an interview with another guitar builder by the name of Megan Wells, and she was talking about the color blue. And that, from emotional perspective, you can say you're feeling blue, and it's a sad connotation.
Yeah.
But you look at a blue sky and it brings you a sense of hope.
Yeah.
So is it trying to maintain that flexibility within the expression of what you're painting for people to be able to experience it on their own terms? Is that a fair enough statement? Or?
That's a fair statement. Yeah, and I think that it's as I mentioned, it's going to cause a certain response in me, and if I'm lucky enough to create something that causes a response in the viewer, it's going to change from viewer to viewer. I laughed when you said the color blue, because I shared a studio with a musician friend of mine years ago, and we painted together. We spent years painting on the same canvas at the same time, which is kind of an interesting approach to art making if you think about it.
Yeah.
And we would create little projects for ourselves, and one was the color blue. And what that amounted to was, okay, the project for today is the color blue. And basically, all of a sudden, with that mindset, you start seeing the color blue everywhere. I hadn't noticed that extension cord that I'm seeing right outside my window, which is blue.
Blue.
Yeah, and I think that that just kind of relates to mindfulness and a way of living that's a little more aware.
Transition to talk about music.
Sounds good.
A little bit, get kind of closer onto some common grounds here. Just in general, what does music mean to you? And it's purposely a very open-ended question, but
what does it mean to me? Well, it's an essential part of my life. I can't imagine a life without listening to music and making music. It's much like painting. It's an essential aspect of how I live and what I enjoy. And I'm definitely a musical omnivore, and I might have bluegrass on 1 minute and bebop on the next minute and Bach on the minute after that. So I like what Duke Ellington said about music. I hope I'm crediting the right musician, but I think it was Duke Ellington. Someone asked him.
He'll call you if you're not.
Yeah, he will, I'm sure. He asked my number on speed dial. Somebody asked him what he thought of country music, and he said, "Country music, I really look at it this way. There are only two kinds of music, good and bad." And that's a pretty succinct way of looking at it. Let's not pigeonhole things too much.
Refine it down to
exactly. Yeah.
two elements.
Okay, that's good. That's bad. Fair enough.
Okay. All right. Well, it's in crafting instruments and things like that, we try to convince ourselves that there's no bad outcome guitar sound wise. It's just different.
Yeah,
I
think that's
it's a fair way to look at it. So.
Yeah, I mean, for crying out loud, that $30 Stella that was my first guitar wasn't. It sounded the way it sounded, and it played the way it played.
Yeah.
And it was. There are guitars that I think sound better, and there are certainly guitars that play better. But that had an aesthetic unto itself that some people, really value that.
Latch on to that, yeah. So speaking of just musical inspirations, if you could name one, either a person or a style, that there's something about that person or style that moves you, and kind of what that response is.
How long is my list?
One.
Yeah.
We got time for one.
All right.
So.
Okay. Lately, I think mainly because I've been very involved in jazz drumming recently. I've been listening to a lot of Bill Evans, wonderful pianist, wonderful composer who was in Miles Davis's band when he was young. And what I love about Bill Evans' music and his playing is how it just runs the gamut of emotion, from very calm and peaceful and meditative to extremely frenetic and demanding as far as listening goes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pick Bill Evans today.
Bill Evans.
I might pick Bill Monroe tomorrow.
All right.
Or Bill Haley the next day.
It's Wednesday. You can tell me what Thursday brings,
Bill
I guess.
Evans is the Bill of the day.
So in your musical expression, if you walked into a room, and obviously you were surrounded with guitars and a drum set, you got a xylophone and plenty of tools here. What is your go-to tool? What do you gravitate towards?
Oh, well, my first instrument when I was a youngster was the piano, and then I took up the cornet, and then I took up the drums, and then for a long time I didn't really play anything but the guitar, and didn't play the guitar when I was young. I started playing the guitar as an adult. And now I've kind of gravitated back to the drums just because I have an opportunity to play in a couple of jazz trios, so that's fun. But yeah, as far as a guitar is so easy. I mean, it's comforting. It's you can't sit down at a drum set for the fun of it and amuse yourself and not. I mean, that's why my drum set's in a different building than where Jackie and I live. But I have guitars close at hand all the time, and it's not unusual at all for me to be looking at a painting with a guitar in my hands, and okay, I'm looking at that painting. I'm playing the guitar, so it's and I mean, I'll be going to Santa Fe next month, and I'll take a guitar with me, and it's a very accessible form of music making. So I guess guitar is my go-to instrument.
Okay. So those two passions, let's take your artwork and guitar. How do you see them intersecting, or what's the relationship? Does one feed off the other, or is it a mutual thing between the two?
Well, I'll tell you this. I can tell you pretty much for most of the paintings in this room what I was listening to when I was painting the picture. And if I want to, my approach to making painting often benefits from painting very vigorously, very rapidly, in a very muscular fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to encourage that approach to art making, I'll go to bluegrass or bebop or something that really keeps me moving. And if I want to do something that is softer and more meditative and just a quieter art statement, there are lots of music that I might listen to, whether it would be Gregorian chants or Bach, maybe Bach not so much, but some of Bill Evans' work will encourage that sort of thoughtful, meditative approach to art making. So yeah, it's definitely, I would say that the work that I'm doing in painting will influence the music that I want to listen to, and the music that I'm listening to often will influence the way I'm painting.
So to go off script for a second, in that conversation, are there moments that you'll be working on a piece of art and listening to a particular genre and have to step back and be like, you know what, maybe this needs a little Led Zeppelin, or, and change it just to be able to, if you're like, it's not quite working, maybe I need to force myself into a different mindset.
That does happen. And I would have to say that typically it's not such a deliberate decision, but it's more intuitive. I'll be looking at a piece and think, let's see what Charlie Parker has to say.
I think that's great. And I think there's moments in my own workshop that it's like, all right, I need to just chill out. It's going to put on a little bit of classical
Wind
Bach.
and Hill.
Yeah, and I just need to dial it back.
Right.
Or there's times where it's like,
gotta get it done.
It's not necessarily trying to rush it, but just being like, I need a little bit more of an emotion behind this.
Sure.
So let's toss in something with a little bit of edge.
A little auditory
and just in the background. Yeah.
Make it a double.
So I guess we'll move on to the purpose of this collaboration. Was to kind of what we're talking with Marshall here is to bring two similar artistic expressions kind of into one body and kind of see where we could go from there.
That would be a guitar body.
And that would be a guitar body, yes. So aside from our friendship, what excited you about doing this project, and what led you to go in the direction that you went?
Sure.
Despite my hard prodding of just being like, you could only paint on the inside of the guitar on this one.
Well, part of it had to do with the quality work that you do. I wouldn't be too enthusiastic about painting the inside of a Stella, for instance, necessarily. Although I won't say no. But yeah, what you do inspires me. Your art inspires me as a fellow artist. So there's that aspect of it. And another thing that appealed to me about the collaboration was, wow, I've never thought of that before. and I think that trying something that is absolutely unique and kind of moving in uncharted waters, at least for me, was appealing to me. And I knew that we could come up with something that would be really cool. So it was fairly simple from my standpoint. You suggested it. I said, yeah, let's do that.
So what we've got two guitars kind of flanking us. This is one instrument, a parlor-sized instrument that I made for Marshall personally, that I wanted him to create a piece of art inside, to just add some emotion, meaning, and almost kind of a family heirloom aspect to it. After the success of that and the responses I received, I approached Marshall to do another project for a showcase that I'll be going to. or by the time this is actually posted, had been to. So this is the instrument, and from the exterior, there isn't much to see other than my handiwork.
Which is plenty to see.
Which is plenty. But with my direction to Marshall was to create a landscape of something along the inside rim of the instrument. And how complicated was it to reach inside the guitar and paint it?
It was almost impossible. I'm surprised I was able to accomplish it at all.
Just kidding. That's not what happened. During the process, I brought down the completed rim set before the top and the back were on, and brought that down to Marshall and let him kind of have work his magic.
Well, that would have been a lot easier if we would have done that.
Notes for next time,
Exactly.
So within the process that you did go through this, were there technical challenges that you came across in transferring your medium to the inside rim of a guitar?
Well, for one, I don't usually work on wood. I work on canvas. So that in and of itself created a bit of a challenge. And it required me to work in acrylic rather than in oil, because oil just didn't work very well on wood. The maybe even a bigger challenge for me was I don't paint miniatures. I mean, I'm very comfortable painting a 5 foot by 7 foot painting. I'm much less comfortable painting a 3-inch by 24-inch painting.
Curved surface.
Curved surface, yeah. So there were some technical issues which were not without their challenges.
Were there any aspects of this experience that might transform your approach going forward, either in just the appreciation of it, or how you might, did it spur any creative ideas of being, like, I've never thought about going in this direction, and where it could take you?
One very specific, and this is just highly specific and doesn't answer your question very well. But after painting the rims of that guitar, I did do a couple of large oil paintings of tulips, which I had never done before. And I took that subject matter and broadened it to something that is much more similar to the work that I typically do.
So on that note, tell me about kind of the direction you went. Obviously, I told you that this guitar was being made to be showcased at the LeConner Guitar Festival over in LeConner, Washington. That happens to be, I think it's like the tulip
in
capital
the heart of the Skagit Valley,
of North America, if I'm not mistaken. So tell me about what kind of resolved in your mind to be able to do this then.
When I was in my early 20s, I played in a rock and roll band. We were based out of Seattle, and sometimes on a day off during the springtime, we'd head up to the Skagit Valley to look at the tulips in bloom. So that's familiar territory to me. I know LeConner and I know the Skagit Valley, and I recognize that. And when you mentioned that you were going to the LeConner Guitar Festival, I thought, well, I know exactly what has to be inside that guitar. So, and it's pretty impressive to see that. If you ever have a chance to go to the Skagit Valley in the springtime to see the tulips in bloom, I would encourage you to take advantage of it and do it. It's amazing, beautiful horizon line, mountains, ocean, guitar. And just, a huge band of purple tulips, and then a huge band of red tulips, and a huge band of yellow tulips. And it's visually really, really stimulating. And that was the inspiration for this particular project that we... Yeah.
So obviously I'll put in some still shots of the interior work on this guitar. Other elements that I do go over in an introduction video for this instrument. But I really wanted, for my direction, I wanted it to keep in the Pacific Northwest. So backwood choice was Oregon myrtle, and the top is a Lutz spruce, taking some abalone shell to signify just being right on the coast, some little triangle-shaped inlays to represent sails, just because there is a sailing community around the corner as well. And just keeping to the tone of using walnut and spalted maple and rock maple for the neck, and just trying to keep true to that effect. I did have to diverge a little bit and go with a pure black ebony fingerboard, but that's just because it looked best that way.
It's not entirely unreasonable for you to make decisions purely on an aesthetic basis, Jeremy.
It's true. So moving on forward from here, what do you hope others might experience while interacting with this project, with this guitar?
Oh, I think that the best case scenario is probably for both of us is that whoever is fortunate enough to play the instrument, or even more fortunate to own the instrument, just finds that object irresistible and something that inspires the guitarist to play more and enjoy the music more and become more deeply involved in the music making process. I think that would be the highest and best use of pretty much any musical instrument.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Agreed. So Marshall, thanks for sitting down with me, going through and putting into context kind of what this artist collaboration series is going to be. My purpose is that one guitar a year, I'll be working with a local artisan to try to bring our stories together in some physical form, as well as just expression of how to create something in the form of an instrument. And maybe a guitar might be something else going forward. I don't really know. Do you have any last thoughts or items that you would like to talk about? Or
well, I just want you to know that I think that we have created a wonderful instrument. It sounds great. It's beautiful, a beautiful instrument to play, and working with you has really been fun. It's
same
been a enjoyable endeavor, and look forward to doing something together again in the future. You never know.
For sure. You never know. I do have to say that it does add an added level of stress when you're building an instrument to have a piece of artwork attached to it that that if I mess up, I'm not just messing up my own art, I'm messing up someone else's art. So that's kind of a side, bit of, I guess you could say, tension within
well, I'm glad
within myself in that process.
I'm glad I could add that anxiety to your life, Jeremy.
Thanks. So thank you for sitting in with us on this conversation to discuss this year's artist collaboration series. So from Pappenfüs Guitars and Noice Studios in Northwest Montana, thanks for watching.